Hello, Mrs. Bennett.
The redcoats have taken over. I have been trying to make this work somehow for a very long time. I have been admiring you guys from America probably since I first saw Gavin's conversion story, and then since your first episode I've been watching you guys. I always love your take because I don't really hear much from the UK other than you guys that talk about the same issues that we are. It seems like a very American dominated space when it comes to discussing the church and just all these issues going on. Now, we had spent a weekend together at the Catholic Identity Conference. It was my first time actually getting to speak with Katherine. I was really happy to get to meet you, Katherine. You're unbelievably funny. Like your talk at that conference, if anybody hasn't seen it yet, well worth the price for the whole conference.
Stop it, Mark.
Katherine.
I can see you leaning in.
Yeah. But you know what it is? It's you had the whole place rolling, and I was very unexpected. Like you're a great opener to get to set the mood for it, and then Mark comes in and tells the saddest, most heart-wrenching story I've ever heard. But no, it was such a great conference. I love getting to hang out with you guys. Me and Mark spent that first night just drinking pints until 2 a.m. and hanging. But
it was about 6 a.m. for me.
Yeah, that's right, because of the time change. So, all right. So just for introductions, for anybody that doesn't know, you guys host a podcast called Catholic Unscripted. All three of you write for the Catholic Herald.
Mm-hmm.
Is that how you guys met?
Yes, kind of. Not well. I had my own YouTube show which I'd been running during COVID. I decided to pick it up because I was teaching at the time and was doing online lessons anyway for the young people, and decided to pick up a podcast and got some guests, and we had some good conversations. Mark was one of them, Gavin was another one. And then when there was a big scandal in the Diocese of Southwark where a Catholic secondary school invited in a gay author to promote his work about gay relationships, which included a blasphemous parody of the Lord's Prayer, we at this point we were all also writing for the Herald. We got together and decided we had to do whatever we could, speak up, write up about against this. And we've got a wonderful bishop here in Southwark, Archbishop John Wilson, and he stepped in and essentially got the author banned, and the whole leadership changed in the school and new governors, which was brilliant. He was undermined by the Catholic Education Service, who apologised on his behalf. Get that? Catholic Education Service. However, he was great. So that's kind of what brought us together.
So, so it pretty much you kind of put the group together though, right, Katherine?
Well, it depends which one of us you ask. We've all got different stories. My memory of it is that Mark, in fact, had the idea. We were all in the pub after a meeting about education, and Mark said, "Hey, Gavin, you used to do Anglican Unscripted. Why don't we all get together and do Catholic Unscripted?" And I think that very night we said, okay, went home, pressed record, and did our first show, and the rest is history.
You guys have for people that are watching, everybody thinks they could just jump on and do a podcast. It's not that easy. And building a rapport with people, it's a difficult thing to do. So Rob and I, when we started, I started this channel. It was just a Catholic trivia show. So we would do Catholic trivia, and Rob was my first guest. He was the first contestant. It was him and somebody else. And I liked Rob so much that I called him the next day and I was like, "Do you want to join the channel with me?" And he said yes. And it's funny when people say Twitter isn't real life, because I've met my real life best friend through Twitter and through doing this. Rob and I talk every day now, and it's funny how technology can be used for bad, but it also can, do something useful like this. So, man, there's so many things I want to talk about. I want to talk about Trump, what it's like from what your guys' perspective from the UK was. I definitely want to talk about the assisted dying bill that you guys are facing right now, because Catherine, I know you've been, where did you go today?
Sorry, I went up to Parliament where the MPs were debating the second reading of the assisted suicide bill, and first of all was outside reporting on the people who had turned out in opposition, and then went inside to hear the MPs debate, and that was over 5 hours. And as you've probably already seen, we're really disappointed that the vote was voted in favour, 55 by 55 votes. That doesn't mean it's being brought into law. It does mean it's going through for its third reading.
All right. So, all right, let's touch on the Trump phenomenon from your perspective, because it's, for us, it was what we've been through over the last 8 years has been just such a roller coaster ride. But do you think that there's, I'll kick it around each one at a time on this one. So do you think that the election of Trump will have implications throughout the world, or do you think this is a localized American phenomenon? I'll throw it to Mark first.
Well, I'm the odd one out of the three of us, really, when it comes to Trump, although my colleagues have convinced me, increasingly worked on me to show me the more positive dimensions successfully. But I've got a big bunch of Catholic friends in America who are all really pro-Trump. So like Hitchborn, you've had on, and he's a really good friend of mine. And so we argue about this incessantly. It was really good at the Catholic Identity Conference that his son was there and on my side. Haha. So I really enjoyed that. I think generally speaking, in the UK, and I'm sure Gavin and Katherine would agree with me, there's a bit of Trump derangement syndrome. And that's largely because of the way probably that the media portrays Trump. He's orange, silly hair. But also, I think there are very reasonable problems with Trump in terms of his, that he's very self-referential in the way that he talks about things. It's easy to parody him in that sort of regard. And the fact that he makes sort of wacky appointments and stuff like that, it unsettles everyone. So political commentators and just the general public are all very nervous. They feel like he's not a serious politician, I'd say, is what and so even I was at a Bible study on Monday night at the Baptist church, and the consensus was that Trump was a lunatic. I would say that's just the general consensus, and that, Kamala was the sensible choice. And when you start saying, like, there was a doctor there who's a really good friend of mine, really sensible guy, palliative care consultant, and he was like, really? He's got Kennedy, who doesn't believe in vaccines, to be in charge of healthcare. And I was like, okay, who did he have before? Who did Biden have? Rachel.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So
it was
someone who doesn't believe in
trans man, a trans woman had that spot before,
against, So I think when you know America and you know Americans, you can see that there's really good reasons why Trump has been chosen, and that doesn't necessarily translate. So I've got a lot of respect for the American people, that the way that they made the decisions was not based on personalities. And that perhaps is the problem here, that we're a bit too obsessed with personalities. And we just had a member of parliament was sacked today for an issue that, you kind of think it was just when you look at what actually the detail of what happened, you wonder if it's just because of the way it looks, rather than the actual substance of what people do. So okay. Now,
I think there is a large portion of Americans who weren't necessarily gung-ho for Trump. Look, Trump has many faults. He is the most narcissistic person in the world. I mean, everything. But in a way, it seems like he might be so narcissistic that he wants to go down in history as the greatest president who's ever lived, because he's worried about his legacy. But there's a large majority of people, and I would even put myself in this, who it wasn't so much voting for Trump, but trying to get this system that has been in place, which had this progressive march off the cliff towards the gender issue. Like we all talk about abortion and things like that as it's the most evil thing, and it is. But the gender stuff is so demonic, and the LGBT stuff is so dangerous that if a party adopts that as their platform, the amount of people who will be harmed by that, the children going forward, it just seemed like such a dangerous thing to allow that to stay in place. Now, Trump isn't much better on those issues, but he does seem to want to get rid of like the more crazier stuff, like the woke stuff. He wants to get rid of that in the military. So it really wasn't a cult of personality thing with Trump this election. Maybe was in 2016, but I think Americans have evolved a little bit. Gavin, do you have a different perspective on that?
Yeah, radically different. I'm trying to stop myself saying things. So let me say the first thing. I mean, we're friends. The difference between Mark and me is that Mark listens to the BBC and I don't. And what I hear Mark saying is what the BBC say. So all the things that I hear, all the reservations Mark has, come from the mainstream media. If you don't listen to them, and you remove the thing from the personality cult, because it should be about policies, not about personality. Who cares how big he is? Who cares what his hair is like? Who cares where he is on the narcissism scale? Who are we to talk? It's all about the political program. The political program he offers appears to be one that works. It worked really well in his first 4 years. It worked exactly for the people who are told to hate him, for the minorities. The highest black employment, highest parity. I mean, he actually did the equity stuff without any of the concepts. And so I think to get lured into Trump derangement syndrome, or to talk about Trump's personality, is to swallow exactly the paranoid propaganda of mainstream media, which appears to be driven only by one ideological perspective.
Yeah.
So I don't accept any of it. I really don't. I don't even see him as a problematic politician. And I absolutely want to amplify the point you made earlier on, which is to say that somebody who is mid-scale on abortion, which isn't very good. As a Catholic, I don't like that at all. But I compare it to the death cult of the Democrats, and there really isn't any comparison at all. Look at the mistake we just made in this country. The Conservatives were absolutely appalling. You can't imagine anyone being worse than them, but the Labour government we have now is 10 times worse than them.
Yeah.
The difference between Trump and the Democrats was just huge. In terms of whether or not he'll succeed, people are laughing at him for the people he's put in place, but he appears to be pursuing a policy of having a competent communicator with a degree of charisma as responsible for each department, and then a very experienced, grifting, hard-working, competent person underneath to deliver. Well, that's a way of doing things. I don't know if it'll work or not, but again, you compare it with I mean, there wasn't anything about the Biden administration that you could commend it on. Least of all, it's wanting to take us into World War III. I mean, the moment Trump was elected, the whole of world order changed. You began this by asking if we thought this was a parochial thing for the States or global. It's global. I mean, all the malefactors put their hands up and said, we're stopping now. Hezbollah, Hamas, Syria, North Korea. I mean, everyone said, oh, sorry about this, we'll behave now because Trump's coming in. He hasn't even done anything.
Well, the thing is, look, I have a son who's 18. The whole thing that's going on in Ukraine right now terrifies me, because you hear our military saying, hey, we have a shortage in new recruits, and I'm worried that if this thing escalates, there's going to be a draft and my son's going to get pulled into it. Like the Ukraine conflict, I just want it over. And Trump campaigned.
It's going to be over. the whole Ukraine conflict is because of American neocon foreign policy from Vietnam onwards, with the expansion of NATO to the east. And whether you like, I get into great trouble because I listen to what Putin says and I find him credible. I listen to what the Americans say and I find it incredible. And I'm a particular fan of Karl Mearsheimer, who follows the realist school of international politics. And ever since the Maidan Revolution, which the Americans toppled a democratic elected government in Ukraine to replace it with somebody who was anti-Russian, I've been in favor of Russian foreign policy and against American foreign policy. And the Americans are fighting to the last Ukrainian. Trump will just stop it. I mean, he'll simply put an end to it within weeks. You needn't worry about your kids. You might want to worry about Ukrainian teenagers and Ukrainian old age pensioners who are being drafted in order to satisfy NATO and European foreign policy. But your kids will be fine, and it will be stopped almost overnight before he's in.
I pray to God. Yeah. So the Russia issue is so bizarre because they started off Trump's first term in 2016 saying that Russia interfered in the election and stole it from Hillary. So from that point on, the narrative in the media was Russia was this evil entity that interfered in our elections, overthrew it, and put Trump in. And they framed the sitting president for treason. Like, they knew exactly what happened. They knew he did not have any connections with Putin or Russia, and they still framed him to hobble his entire first term.
I heard Tulsi Gabbard say this morning, as she was interviewed by a guy called Trigonometry, that the first moment she knew there was a crosshair on her back was when she was denounced by Hillary Clinton as being a Russian asset.
Yes,
that's been the story tale all the way through.
And it's total nonsense. It's so unbelievable. Now, look, Tulsi's another person who she has many things I'm not crazy about, but I love that she's anti-war. Like, I'm so tired of these wars, these foreign wars. Trump made it so as he was on his way out, he gave a timeline that he wanted us to withdraw from Afghanistan. Within a week of us withdrawing from Afghanistan, we were in Ukraine. The military industrial complex just keeps churning. It goes from one place to another. They don't care where they're fighting. They just want to make sure they get to keep blowing people up. And I want it to end desperately. So, Katherine, how about your perspective? Because it is interesting, where we get our news from really does determine our whole perspective on things. So what's your perspective on Trump? And do you think it's a global or just a local phenomenon?
There's a lot to like about Donald Trump, a lot that I do like about him, not least how much David Lammy, our foreign secretary, had to squirm when after calling him a Nazi and calling for goodness knows what against him, to have to obsequiously suck up to him. So there is a lot I like, but I think to some extent I think it's a distraction. We're talking about politics. We're looking to try. If we look to Trump as a solution, I think we're barking up the wrong tree. Yeah. Trump was, it seemed to me anyway, stronger in 2016 on the pro-life issue. He fell away from that. He started talking about IVF, which is, to anyone who knows even a little bit about IVF, is abhorrent. It's a great evil, equally as bad as abortion, and
maybe infinitely worse because of how much more goes into it.
Yeah, and it involves the destruction of embryos and the freezing of embryos and the hideous torture that involves. So that's not a pro-life president. However, the problem you have is that you're faced with a binary choice. Now, what you've said about the trans issue and his bringing Elon Musk in, and how Elon Musk has been, had personal involvement in that, the way that trans ideology can ruin people's lives and ruin people's families. And I think that was a good move. But I think what I'd want to say about all of this is we can't just whitewash everything with Trump. You can't say, look, Trump's the good character. He's the one who's going to get rid of trans ideology. And Kamala Harris is the bad actor because she's involved in all this woke stuff. So now the right decision has been made, and isn't it all wonderful? Because the truth is, the devil is in the details. There was peace and stability in the Middle East under Trump. It's true, but he was involved in conflict in Yemen, in Venezuela. Drone strikes. He boasted about how Biden had done very little in terms of Ukraine, and he's doing much more. I'm not saying there wasn't stability, but as you say, I tweeted yesterday something like it's all about death and money. The thing is, these wars rage on. Where they rage on maybe is slightly hidden from us more than some kind of war that there's an interest in us hearing about, but it doesn't mean it's not going on elsewhere. And I do have concerns about Elon Musk and the artificiality and the transhumanism and stuff. And so I have huge concerns, whoever comes in, because at the end of the day, we're talking about a culture war, which is a terrible problem, and we need to be in the fight. But let's not forget that the culture war is nested in a spiritual war. This is spiritual warfare. This is spiritual battle. And I think that we fall on our knees, we strive for sanctity, we keep our children close to God, and we don't switch off, dust our hands and say, great, the right people are in charge doing the right things, so all is well. I think someone like Ed Fazer was right to call on to criticize Donald Trump in the lead up to the election and say, look, if you're pro-life, if you're anti-abortion, this is not good. We had Melania Trump speaking up in favor of abortion, which was absolutely horrifying. And she's quite quiet, which means when she does speak up, that really matters. So I don't know, Mark presented it as, you know, Katherine and Gavin are both pro-Trump and he's not. I don't think it's that simple. I'm certainly pro getting rid of all the trans ideology stuff. And I like the fact that he's tough, but I don't think it means that we should overlook the real problems at play or forget that this is a spiritual battle.
Well, okay, so what are, I even look at my own Catholic reversion, and when I come back to the faith, it wasn't until maybe 5 or 6 years ago that I fully understood the evils of IVF. And you're talking, I mean, I'm a lifelong Catholic, right? But so much of the issue in this culture war is that the Catholic hierarchy refuses to actually speak the truth and teach people why these things are evil, right? So when you had Obama came in and he put this Affordable Care Act in, it was forcing like religious, even like monastery or not monasteries, forcing all religious groups to pay for birth control and abortion and things like that. And the bishops, instead of going out and speaking about the evils of artificial birth control, talked about religious freedom, right? Because that's a safe issue. But none of them got into why artificial birth control is actually an evil. So it's almost like we're expecting something from our political leaders like Trump that our own hierarchy doesn't discuss. I mean, if you have Francis bringing in the trans crew this week, you know, he had a whole group of trans people come in this week. He's inviting Italy's top abortionists to come and see him. He's putting all these people in the John Paul II Institute that are, none of them are pro-family anymore. So if it's coming from there, how can we even get leaders to fully understand the gravity of even these issues that we're talking about? I don't know what we're supposed to do in this situation.
Well, I've been saying that for weeks on our show. That thankfully, on the assisted suicide issue, the bishops have been really quite vocal over the last few weeks. But it is literally the last few weeks, and the point is exactly as you said, that we've lost the argument in the culture, and we're not having. We've got all the answers, you know, as Catholics. What the church teaches is incredibly powerful because it's true. And unfortunately, exactly as you articulated there, why are they not teaching this stuff? They seem, if they're frightened of having the arguments, is it because they don't understand it well enough, or is it because they don't believe it? It must be one of those things. But it's deeply disappointing. And therefore, when something like today happens in the UK, it was a fait accompli as far as I was concerned. It's going to happen at some point. We've failed to win the argument on the ground, and therefore it's going to, because it's a reasonable position that they're taking, which is that it's reasonable to avoid suffering, you know, that it's nice to avoid suffering. That's what the culture is saying. And if no one is giving the proper answers to it, except for us three on some obscure YouTube channel, you know, like, where are the bishops in all this? They should have been having these arguments for months. We knew it was coming.
Well, even with, I'm sorry, did you want to talk?
No, it was just to say, not months, years, decades, centuries. The problem is trying to address something like this. I bumped into two people who work at the Bishops' Conference today, and they were saying the bishops are trying so hard to talk to the Canadian Bishops' Conference about their experience of introducing assisted suicide, and they're trying to get information, they're trying to do this. And I'm thinking, the vote is today. The vote was last month. The next vote is next month. Why are we doing this now? How have we got to a culture that even contemplates assisted suicide? We had to shift to a mindset that even begins to open up that question. That's where we failed, not in the last couple of weeks or the last couple of months. Sorry, Anthony, carry on.
No, well, even with the Canadians, I think I wish I had the actual number because I might be over or under here, but it's something like 20% of Canadian deaths are through that MAID program. It's astronomically big, this end of life thing in Canada. Canada is a death cult at this point, you know. But we went so many years where before Francis, under Benedict's papacy, it would be any bishop that paid lip service to the abortion issue, we just thought they were a good guy. It was like, oh, good, he stands up for life. He stands up for life. And then when Francis came in, you kind of saw all of them kind of drop that veneer that they had, right? Now, the immigration thing, because the Catholic instinct to be kind to the stranger is good. Like, that's a good instinct to want to be kind to somebody who's down and out, like showing empathy for somebody suffering, things like that. But what's happened with the immigration issue, especially in the United States, I don't know how it is in the UK, but the government hands out money to these to the bishops to go and handle the immigrants that are coming in. So you have all these NGOs, you have like all these Catholic ministries. I don't know why. I forget all their names. I don't know why, but so they're laundering millions and millions of dollars to these NGOs that are through the Catholic Church, because the Catholic Church no longer has the people in the seats, and they get a majority of their money through the government now for these programs. So in their mind, it's okay, we get a ton of money if the border stays open, plus maybe some of these immigrants come in and we get to fill the pews a little bit. Instead of actually teaching the Catholic faith and building the faith out organically, it's an artificial thing. And it seems like, to me, that the church could be complicit in human trafficking because of this.
I think it's interesting that one of the different things is the problem that we've got over here really is that most of the immigrants that we've got coming in, the illegal immigrants that we've got coming in, are Muslims. So they're immediately in conflict with the culture, because even though we are a post-Christian culture, you might say, we are a Christian culture to some extent. And so we're doing the Christian thing of saying, oh, it's lovely, everyone's got dignity, come and be our friends. And they're saying hello Akbar and chopping us up on London Bridge. Yeah. So, this is we're going to have increasingly that problem. With America, I think at least you've got the Mexican. Well, you say that, I think you're getting a few Africans and stuff coming in that route now as well, aren't you? But at least when it's Mexicans, you kind of got something to work with because their culture is Catholic, Yeah. And we found with the Eastern Europeans, with the Poles and that who came in when the EU borders were open, they were good neighbours, they were good. They fitted into they came in and they integrated with the culture because they were more Christian. I mean, that's my perspective on it anyway.
Yeah, the everybody has been pushing this idea that the Democrats want open borders because then they'll legalize them and they'll have more votes. I don't think that was ever what it was about. I really have never worried about Central and South American immigrants that are Catholic coming into America. That has happened throughout history. When the Italians came, they hated the Italians. When the Irish came, they hated the Irish. But when you start bringing in Muslims and when you start bringing in, voodoo, like the people from Haiti that practice voodoo, this is how you destroy a culture. This is how we wind up where we're in a situation in America now where there's nothing that will unite us as a people. Even pop culture used to unite us, right? Because there was only 4 or 5 channels. We'd all go and you'd watch Seinfeld, and then the next day at work, everybody would talk about the Seinfeld episode you saw. Now, because even the media is so sporadic and everybody's watching their own little YouTube thing, there's nothing for us to even unite around anymore. The religions are totally, there still is a semblance of Christianity in America that from the few people I've spoken to from the UK, almost seems like you guys it's not polite to even speak about religion at all. Is that true?
Yeah, I definitely think there's there's an element of the religion of nice. It's taken root perhaps more easily in Britain because we are so painfully polite about everything. And I quite often refer back to Pope Benedict XVI's Jesus of Nazareth, in which he says Barabbas and Jesus are presented to us as these kind of two messianic figures, and the people call for Barabbas. And he understands his ministry different to Christ, and that's what the people call for. And it's like this earthly way of dealing with it. It's like man can sort out the problems, man can fix everything, we don't need God. And we see that kind of thinking running right through history with the French Revolution and the throwing off of God and the hoisting of man above God. And so I think, and then what comes from that is we say, well, let's just try and be nice. And then we're being so nice, but actually it's incoherent, because you can't be nice, because we're in a fallen world and we're sinful, each one of us, and we need grace. And we can try to solve our own problems, but we're never going to. So something like immigration, to just look at a huge issue like that and say, let's just be nice and open the borders, is just ridiculous. It's not even a reasonable position. It's certainly not a Catholic position to take that view. And when our bishops don't stand up and say that, and teach our faith, teach the truth of our faith, and instead just what you often hear is talk about the environment, about the climate, about immigration, but not with any rich, deep teaching that is going to answer people's deepest concerns and deepest needs. And in a way, it's so rude, because it's totally ignoring the many, many millions of often quite poor people and disadvantaged people whose lives are troubled by and threatened by this, whose families and place and communities are being destroyed by this. And then it's often the champagne socialists sitting in Islington who are swilling their champagne and talking about how wonderful immigration is, but it doesn't touch them. This is the problem. It doesn't touch these people. So yeah, I think it's the religion of nice, and it's us trying to fix our problems. And as Christ said, the poor will always be with you. And Judas, who quickly wanted to take that, the woman who anoints his feet, shouldn't we give this to the poor? We have to be able to see through some of this stuff and see it's not about being nice or unkind. We have to strive for holiness, but we have to also acknowledge that we nation matters, family matters, culture matters. And also I'd ask the question, who is this? Who's doing this, and what's at play here? Because it's easy to say, oh, the Muslims are coming in, but there is some kind of interest in shaking up the world to eradicate borders, to eradicate nations, and to eradicate family. And that's sinister and that's dark.
Yeah, the idea of a multicultural democracy instead of a Christian culture has so permeated everybody, and I think even Catholics too. So in American Catholic schools, they don't teach Christian history. Like, you can't separate Christian history from European history. They are one and the same. Europe was created through Christianity as it spreads. I think it should be mandatory in school for them to. Did you guys read Tom Holland's book Dominion? It's not specifically a Catholic book, but it does show how drastically different the world was before Christ comes. And I know, Gavin, you've spoken about this a little bit, right? So you see the ancient gods were so different from anything that resembles. People are so steeped in Christianity, even in a post-Christian world, that they take for granted the idea of being kind to someone, where in the ancient world, they would just throw you to the side if you were, children, if they were born with a deformity, would just be left on the side of the road, and hopefully somebody would pick them up and make them a slave. Otherwise they would die like that. And because we aren't teaching our kids not even in public school, in Catholic schools too, because we're not actually teaching them where our civilization came from, it's almost hopeless to me that people will ever, I don't know. This idea of the multicultural democracy is doomed to fail, because what unites a people really is a cultus. It's the way you worship. And there's never been a culture in the history of humanity that was atheist, right? Like, there's never been an atheist culture. They've always had gods, but this this new world we live in where people think you could just go about things without God, and you're seeing those gods starting to pop back up. I mean, Artemis Ephesia, her priest would wear women's clothing and castrate themselves, and people will bring their children to God. I mean, it's drag queen story hour. So the void that's being left by us is now being filled by those ancient deities that are coming back around. It's pretty insane, the world that we're raising our children into. I don't. So like you were saying with Trump, I think there's an opportunity for him to make some substantial changes and maybe slow the progress of what they were going towards, which I don't know what that ultimate goal is, but it seems like they want some kind of control over everything. But it seems like Trump was a big obstacle to them because he really is a middle of the road 90s Democrat. Like the guy, I never understood this hatred for him because he doesn't put anything crazy forward. It's bizarre to me that they're so adamant that he's literally Hitler, things like that. It's like he's really not. He's really kind of a media. He's like a Bill Clinton figure, and conservatives today jump at that. It's very strange how conservatives today have, like, if we're not trying to conserve Christian values, what is it that we're trying to conserve? Is it we've replaced religion with politics now, and it's a strange time we're living in.
It's like modernism in slow motion, isn't it? But as to your point about Trump doesn't do anything drastic, I mean, he does, doesn't he? And I think the political reaction is, well, don't listen to his rhetoric. Over here, anyway, the political reaction is don't listen to his rhetoric, see what he does. So, for example, he tweeted about 60% tariffs. You know, but now it's much more reasonable, you know, like in actuality, but he's constantly sort of raising up the hyperbole, isn't he, for whatever game he's playing with it, and then the reality is much more sane, you know. So.
Yeah, well, the tariff thing I think is him doing the big ask, right? So you see these caravans coming up from South America coming towards the border, and Trump says, hey, Mexico, we're going to put a 50% tariff on all your goods. All of a sudden the Mexican president says, we're going to stop the caravan for you, don't worry about it, you know. So things like that. I don't think he's that. You would think the man, after 8 years, would have picked up on some things, but he really has. He's very myopic in how he sees things, and I think it was a big cultural moment for us. I think that the election of Trump is more symbolic than it is like on the ground meaningful. I don't think that much will change, but I think just hearing the way the media has changed their tune. You see even AOC took her pronouns out of her bio. You see CNN is now allowing Scott Jennings to go on there as a conservative. And I think that there is going to be a tonal change, and they're going to back off some of this stuff for a little while. I mean, I don't know how long that lasts, but we'll have to see, you know.
We'll take what we can get now, won't we?
Well, yeah, the small wins. So, but okay, so now in the UK, do you guys think that you will have a populist rise in the UK?
Can I before we go down that route, reframe the discussion a bit? You took it back to Trump, but I think you missed a point, and I'd like to suggest there's a point in the crossroads we might all take, which helps us a little bit. We're Tom Holland thing is looking backwards, but and he's right, of course. We have to look forwards. We're being faced uniquely by a series of totalitarian threats. They're enormous. And the only resistance to any of them is Catholicism. Yeah. One of the reasons why I'm very pleased to have become a Catholic at this stage of my life, by accident, not by cleverness, is because having seen what we're being faced with, it's now very clear to me that there is only the Catholic Church and Catholicism that has the remotest chance of dealing with these totalitarian threats. One of them in Europe in particular is Islam. And the only antidote to Muhammad is Jesus. It's a great shame that we've been so culturally conditioned by the past that Catholic voices aren't in love with Jesus sufficiently to go out there and to talk about who he is and the miracle of the Mass, the miracle of salvation. It's if we don't do that, it's on us. It's our failure. We can't complain. At the same time, the other totalitarian thrust is from soft communism. It's the whole woke thing. It's vicious, it's serious. We have a thought police in England now who are stopping us expressing our opinions. Again, the only antidote to soft totalitarianism is Catholicism. We believe in the uniqueness of the individual. We don't believe in defining people by the collective. Once again, we sleepwalked into this. And I wouldn't want to be a bishop, because the responsibility of the bishops for the last 20 years lays heavily on their shoulders. The church should have been vigorous in its enthusiasms for everything that Christianity offers, because it's an antidote to this. The other problem that we have is to do with the New World Order. You mentioned it. Why have they seen Trump as an interruption? Katherine was right. We don't need to sit here and say we like Trump. Trump's a good guy. We just need to recognize that he was a problem that they wanted to kill to get out of the way. He simply acted as a brake to what they were planning. Whether it's Bill Gates feeding chemicals to cows to stop them burping that gets into our food stream as well, or the whole global warming controversy, which is a scam of the worst scientific kind. That's not to say that there isn't global change. Of course there is, but the fact that what we're being presented with is the preparation for a new autocracy again and again. Catholicism says we're not here to make the world safe. We're passing through. It belongs to the devil. We're on our way to heaven. Every single one of these autocratic, totalitarian philosophies can only be resisted by, there isn't anything else. Alexander Dugin, who's one of the supposedly one of the intellectuals in Russia, has been saying, and you hear nobody in the West saying it, fascism is broken and doesn't work. Communism is broken and doesn't work. Liberalism is broken and doesn't work. What else is there? There isn't anything. One of the things that Putin and Dugin have been trying to do, I don't think with much hope, but at least you hear Dugin articulating it, is there needs to be a new form of Christian-orientated, nationalist-orientated philosophy that can stand up to the brokenness of liberalism, fascism, and communism. Now, I don't know what that would be, but I mean, I know Katherine's quite keen on a form of Catholic integralism, which she might speak to. And whilst I don't understand it, I can at least see there's nothing else on the plate anywhere. So I don't think we don't need to defend ourselves in terms of the past. We need to recognize that the whole of human freedom and autonomy, as we've enjoyed it through democracy that Christianity has provided, is right on the edge in the next 10 years. If someone like Trump can help us, that's great. Let's take him, because there's hardly anybody else. But essentially, all the threats we face can be resisted to some extent, both conceptually and in the power of the Spirit, by Catholicism. And that's one of the reasons why all four of us are doing what we're doing. We are the Catholic voices trying to articulate that and to wake the church up to take on board its responsibilities.
What makes me nervous is that the hierarchy that we have, it seems like the church is going through a passion right now, and unless it does go through that passion, there can be no resurrection. So the current state of the church doesn't seem like it's capable or equipped to handle the actual crisis we're facing, right? They had the Second Vatican Council right in the midst of the sexual revolution, and instead of actually addressing that, they go and I'm not even criticizing the council for anything. I'm just saying that, like, the church should have been addressing the actual revolution happening in the culture, and they completely ignored it to go off on this pastoral approach to everything. And I don't know how, because you came into the church in 2019, right before COVID hits. It must have seemed apocalyptic to you at that time. You become Catholic, you think you're going to be ordained, because we had you on previously and you told us your story. And then all of a sudden the churches get shut down. I know a few people that converted right before COVID or during COVID. And I'm like, praise God, man, that he still was able, because the visible signs of the miraculous nature of the church were definitely not there during that time. They were all cowards. They shut everything down. Not one of them had the backbone to, it was, Eric Sammons had that map where every diocese that shut the sacraments down just went black, 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 black. And before you know it, the whole country was black. So I don't know what the future for like the when the church arises again, I don't think it will look like it did in the first century, where it's going to be a rebirth of that Catholicism. I think it's going to be something a little bit new with elements of that, and then something of this new thing that comes. And I've always kind of felt like the political structure we have and the church both kind of need to, it sounds horrible to say, but they both need to die so something new can come and a new civilization can be birthed. Is that a little crazy to think?
No, I think that sounds, I know what you're getting at. I think one of the big problems, to go back a little bit with what Gavin was saying there about this soft totalitarianism and these ideologies, and like whatever way it's lopsided, there's nothing seems like the right solution but for the Catholic Church, and that of course is because it's true. And so of course that's the antidote. Margaret Sanger, famous feminist, said the Catholic Church is the greatest obstacle to her subversive aims, and so they are, and so it is, and we have to make sure that people remember that it is. And I think we've got a heavy emphasis on rights talk, and that's crept in, hasn't it, over the decades, over the centuries, is this idea of rights talk. I'd like to go back to the Reformation, but obviously we're focusing more on the last 100 years, where we talk about rights. Now, we shouldn't even be in a situation at all where we can discuss the right to assisted suicide, the right to abortion, the right to have two gay men marry and found a family. These are not rights, because instead we should talk about human law being downstream of natural law, which is in itself born out of eternal divine law. Now, if human law is not thus, then it's no law at all. So when the churches say you can go shopping in Sainsbury's, that's a big grocery store over here, by the way, or any other grocery store is available, Lidl, Marks and Spencer's, Tesco. You can go shopping, but you can't go and receive our Lord Jesus Christ in the Eucharist during COVID, is madness. It's not just madness, it's wrong. And actually, there's no authority, there's no right authority to say that you cannot receive Jesus in the Eucharist. So it's because we've fallen with everything, with the culture, the religion of nice, with rights talk, into this idea of just, we've lost sight of what's true, and so we're more fragile and vulnerable to being tyrannized. And you saw how people during COVID, and we ended up with this kind of bizarre safetyism. Oh, stay safe at all costs, put a mask on, disinfect your hands. Oh, to what end? To what end are we doing all of these things? And we still see it now. It comes up in other guises, this idea of safetyism at all costs. No suffering, shield you from suffering, shield you from death, be safe. Because we've taken our eye off the telos. What are we created for? Who are we? Is our creation a given thing? What do we discover about ourselves, which we find in the natural law? And then from that awareness of being a created thing, a created being, we look at how we might then build a human law that is for the common good. People think that Catholicism is all about no's. It's about freedom to become what God has created you to be, not freedom from constraint or, arbitrary freedom, but we need to be free to become what God has created us to be. And at the moment, everything is upside down. And you started by talking about the church. And of course, as Chesterton said, we don't want a church that will move with the world, but a church that will move the world. Yeah. So as you said, in that crucial time in the 60s, when the sexual revolution was going on and the pill was being introduced, thank God for Humanae Vitae, but we needed a church to say, we're not going to shift with the world. We're going to be the anchor that the world moves around. And that's how it should be. But that order has crumbled.
Well, even Humanae Vitae wasn't even that strong.
No, it wasn't. You're right.
It wasn't that strong like that. There was such a missed opportunity there to actually. I mean, when you look back at the mess we're in today, almost all of it can be brought back to birth control. All of it. Agreed. I mean, it's led to chaos in our culture. You think about the young kids that are out there just sleeping around with anybody. It has led to misery in this whole world. And my heart breaks that the church is silent on this stuff, and it's fallen to people like us. So all the things you're saying there, it's like, yeah, this is the beauty of Catholicism. It's why is it our job? I mean, I think it's good that we have that opportunity, but man, where is the church? It's so, there was this feeling when Benedict got elected of, especially in America, because you had Scott Hahn and Franciscan University, and you had all these Protestant converts coming in, and there was an excitement about being Catholic back then that newer converts probably won't get. So, Gav, you might not get this, and a lot of the younger kids I talked to who just converted recently under Francis don't get. There was this real excitement around Benedict getting elected and thinking, okay, there's going to be a little bit of a return back to normalcy. He gave us Summorum Pontificum, and to go from that to Francis, it shattered my faith for a couple of years. Like it really did. It shattered my faith. I wound up leaving the sacraments for about a year and a half, and my whole life fell apart. Like it really did. My marriage was almost, I almost lost my marriage because of leaving the sacraments. It's one of those things where God just showed me, it's like, don't worry about who's in Rome. The sacraments is what's going to ground your life. Live out your life, embody your faith, and, kind of not, but for the culture at large, when they're seeing documents come out that are talking about blessing gay unions and stuff, it's heartbreaking to me as a Catholic that I feel like I'm arguing, like if I'm talking to a Protestant, I feel like I am arguing for a Catholicism that no longer exists under this papacy. It's a strange thing.
I'd like to give you a different perspective. I mean, interestingly, you go back to Francis and Benedict. You see, I'll go back to JP too, because I've been a Catholic voyeur for the whole of my life. It's taken me a very long time to become a Catholic because so many Anglicans allowed themselves to hug themselves with Catholic fantasies at night without having to pay the price when they got up in the day. It was a very cheap way of doing one's spirituality. But nonetheless, as I spent 2 years in postgraduate work with the Jesuits, and I worked for 25 years in a team with Catholics in it. But the great thing about JP2 was it was very hard not to see the Catholic Church as the great mover culturally when he came in, and appeared to be single-handedly responsible for bringing down the regime that had colored the whole of my life with the nuclear threat and with that. So if you go from JP2 to Francis, what does it look like? It looks like the Catholic Church is the answer to everything. Then the rest of the world gets involved in a very, very profound and intense spiritual conflict, and it gives way. The whole of the Protestant Church has just disintegrated in my lifetime. So wouldn't it be surprising if the Catholic Church remained immune from that spiritual conflict? Of course it's not immune. Francis is the fifth columnist. He's the spirit of Judas. Francis is quite clearly the enemy's way of infiltrating the Catholic Church. I don't care whether I'm a sedevacantist or not. That's the technical issue. The spiritual issue is that this terrible poison that has destroyed the rest of Christendom is now inside the Catholic Church. Well, it has to be got out, and so all we're doing is we're waiting for the venom in the wound to be sucked out and spat, and then there'll be a decent pope. My only fear is that it will take. If it takes more than one pope after Francis, I'm going to have trouble hanging on because I'm a weak, frightened man. I'm praying to God that when Francis goes, the normal Catholicism will be restored, and everyone will just say, that magisterium, get rid of it. That's nothing. Let's pick up where Benedict went from. Now, maybe it'll take two. If I'm unlucky, maybe it'll take one. But it's a sine curve. It was very good under JP2. It collapsed to be quite as bad as it was good under Francis. God will restore us to some form of normative Catholicism shortly.
So do you think going to a Benedict XVII figure as the next pope would be, because I see, look, the past few years have definitely, because I have this nostalgia for JP2 and Benedict that the younger guys can never understand. I mean, I adored both of them, but I also remember as a kid my mom, somebody asked my mom something about like, how can only Catholics go to heaven or something? And my mom responded with, if you're a Muslim, be a good Muslim. If you're a Hindu, be a good Hindu. And she was getting that directly from, I believe, Mother Teresa. But Mother Teresa and John Paul II were very close. And I think the project of ecumenism is the root of so much of the problems in the church right now, right? So it can't just be a Benedict the 17th character. And I also don't think it needs to be this ultra trad who gets rid of the Second Vatican Council. Maybe, you know, you have to go back and address some of those things. But in a way, a Benedict the 17th, I don't know if that's good. And I think anybody that comes in that is even slightly to the right of Francis, you're going to see a schism, because the progressive Catholics that adore Francis see a trajectory that the church is heading towards. And if that gets interrupted in any way,
there'll be no schism from the left, because they're parasitic. The dangerous schism is always from the right, because it's ideological. The left are parasitic. They're desperate to be in the church. They've got nowhere to go if they're not in the church. They might complain.
Interesting.
The question is, so somebody my age will be elected pope in about 2, 4, 6, 8 years time. Let's just say it was me. One of the things I would do is I'd look back over my life and I'd say, what have we to learn from Catholicism under JP2, under Benedict, under Francis? What worked? What didn't work? How were we duped? How were we prophetic? Where did we nearly break? Where were we strong? Where's the renewal? Where's the holiness? These are just ordinary standard Catholic questions that anybody with any prayer life and IQ above 80 can face. So, I mean, I think Francis is there's something very profoundly corrupt in his thinking. He cannot think straight. But assuming that we have someone who is not corrupt in their thinking, there's an element of it being a CEO to being Pope. You used to say, how does my organization flourish? The currency, it's not economic currency, it's sanctity currency. Why would another Pope go down the route that Francis has taken, knowing that all you do is to suck the energy out and the vision out of the best, and bring into the church everything that's most corrupt in society? That's why there's something that's deranged about Francis, because he can't see straight. He sees the opposite of what is good and true.
The personnel choices.
You just need excuse me. You just need a semi-competent Catholic Pope and a bit of common sense and prayer, and it'll be fine.
Yeah, the personnel choices he's made, the men that he's elevated. Oh, I mean, you think about the crop of cardinals that he's elevated, and that's the group of men that are going to go forward. I think the next pope, I honestly think the next pope needs to be willing to be a martyr at heart. Like, he needs to be willing to be despised by the world, right? And in a way where it doesn't, almost like Trump. Trump, the things they say about him, he just kind of lets it brush off his shoulder and he just keeps going. We're going to need a pope who is going to speak the Catholic faith clearly without worry for the repercussions. Now, when that happens, because in a big part of why I think Catholics are not in any kind of persecution right now is because of Francis. Francis keeps talking about, moving in that direction, so they're like, all right, let's back off the church a little, let's not get on to, like, even the abuse issues that we have under Francis, all the different men he's covered for and brought to Rome to the media gives him a complete pass on that stuff, and it's all because of documents that allow for same-sex blessings and things like that. But if you get another even somebody that's a Benedict the 17th, or God willing a Leo the 14th or something, that is all going to change. And I really do think there's going to be a shift towards using the love is love thing as a way to turn what we believe into hate. And it's going to lead to mass persecution at that point. Okay, so yeah, I mean, that's just the way I see it.
Yeah, completely. That's true. I think the thing is, what we're called to be is Our Lady, isn't it? We're called to have humility. And Our Lady, I was thinking of Our Lady today when I was at Parliament, and despite all our hopes and prayers, the bill passed. The bill went through, and there were so many disappointed people, so many people who'd worked hard. And I think the instinct is to be so angry and to shake your fists. And of course, we think of Our Lady at the foot of the cross. And the worst thing, this deicide, this killing of God himself, her son, who she stood at the foot of the cross, offering her son, in her fiat, she said, "Be it done to me according to your word, Lord." And then at the foot of the cross, there she is accepting God's will, even through that pain and suffering. And I think what we're called to be is holy. And I think we need the church to be holy. We need a pope who is holy, and we need a humility. We need humility, and we need not to be afraid, no matter what blows come, no matter what pain we face, that we, in all humility, say, we are not here to edit God's mail. We are here to deliver it intact. And we don't need a pope who's going to compromise on any of that. Yeah. So in fact, what I'd like to see is less. We don't need so much. We live in this age of constant, he talks about noise, and the pollution of noise. But sadly, I'm afraid our Holy Father adds to that. Yeah. We don't need so much. Let's bend our knee, receive what's given by God, and in all humility, just trust and hope, because the battle is won.
Yeah, it seems like Francis has fractured Catholics in a way that I know when I growing up listening to Catholic apologetics and all the different, I would see people in the same circuit. They were all friends. They loved one another. And ever since Francis, you see they're fractured now. These are people who were friends and had these lifelong friendships where they were traveling and giving conferences, and now they don't even speak to one another. And it's, the amount of damage. Mark, I saw you tweeted out today, worst pope ever, right? Now, do you guys catch any flack?
That's not like you, Mark.
Well, I think that's a pretty reasonable thing to say, but there's this weird thing going on with these young converts and the pope splainers and stuff, where it's they don't even want to recognize reality. They kind of ignore all the problematic stuff, and just, if Francis says slightest good thing, they'll, most base pope ever. I have such a distance between me and those guys at this point. It's I'm not someone who thinks Francis is an anti-pope. I do think he's the pope. I'm doing the best I can to be Catholic, raise my family Catholic, and try to teach my children the faith the best I can. But I'm not going to pretend that this hasn't fractured the family. Because that's what we are as Catholics. We're a family, right? And to see siblings no longer brothers in Christ, but now they're mortal enemies, it's one of the most heartbreaking things. Do you guys catch any flack from your local parish, your local bishops, or anything for the issues that you guys are speaking out on?
No, I don't think we do really. We hear in the background quite a lot that a lot of bishops sort of listen to us and tune in, and I don't know whether they always agree with us or like the things that we say, but I think it's very important that what we're trying to do, I think, is to be normal Catholics, trying to live out the faith, exactly as you said, and giving our honest reaction to the inconsistencies of this papacy, as you said, the fact that he's hiding abusers in plain sight and promoting them, and people like Marco Rupnik and Grazi, and
those are the things we jump on, Mark. But in reality, the thing that breaks all of our hearts is the loosening of the Catholic sexual ethic, right? In this time where what you see happening in the culture, instead of the Pope reinforcing some of the beautiful things that John Paul II taught, he's just making everything so ambiguous so that Catholics don't even know what we believe anymore. I have a friend who just opened up to me 2 days ago, and he said, "Hey man, I haven't been going to mass. I finally went back to confession. While I was in the confessional, the priest asked me, hey, can we put a pause on confession, just go in my office and talk?" So my friend has been having a hard time missing mass, and he winds up going in the office and talking with the priest for about 45 minutes, and they get to the heart of it. And the heart of it is he was just so discouraged from thinking, like, what do we even believe as Catholics anymore? It seems like everything's up for grabs now. It feels like, oh, I mean, are we worshiping Pachamama at this point? Are we still Catholic? Like, can I even be Catholic in this current situation? So the priest had a really good talk with him. My friend has returned to the sacraments, thank God. But it just goes to the root of just how catastrophic this papacy has been.
I've been sent to Coventry. No one will talk to me. The only people who talk to me are Anglicans who are coming over in my wake. They phone me up and say, we're coming, be patient, we're on the way. The what's extraordinary is the hierarchy don't speak to me. They pretend like I don't exist, with the exception of one wonderful, faithful Irish bishop. I would have even have thought they might have said, Gavin, tone it down, or who do you think you are? You've only just come in, for goodness sake. But there's an absolute silence, and all I get is people sidling up to me either in the parish or in the street saying, "You're Gavin, thank you." But they whisper it like no one must catch them out talking to me, because it's a secret that nobody, and there's this extraordinary sort of secretive thank you that comes through. Otherwise, on the surface, there's this in very odd, cosmetic, weird silence, which I don't understand. I mean, sometimes I think, have I really screwed up? Am I a naughty person? Am I being punished? Why is everyone silent? And it's very hard to know.
It's so strange. So a few priests have recognized me when I go to mass, and that's always awkward because you don't know if they're gonna chastise me or what. But the few that I've encountered that knew me and just going to mass and like shaking their hand as I'm walking out the door, they've been very encouraging. Like, look, keep doing what you're doing. So, but I mean, they wouldn't say it publicly, of course. But Katherine, you probably look at the analytics for your channel. Do you guys have a big UK following, or is it mainly America?
It's mostly the UK, but followed very closely by America.
Oh,
so
wow.
North America, the US. But we have little pockets in all the English-speaking countries. There's quite a big group in Australia, and also in some other non-English countries. We have little members popping up and people who watch us, and out of the blue we'll get a message saying, "Hey, I'm watching you in India or Papua New Guinea or somewhere." So, but yeah, it is mostly the UK, including the UK and Ireland.
So happy to hear that, because there's not many people in the UK doing what you guys are doing. Like, I really think there's nobody, right? So in America, you got Taylor Marshall and Kennedy. I mean, well, Kennedy's Canadian, but I'm saying you have all the trads in America, and it's a very big industry here. Like, we're a very modest channel. I think what we're trying to do is just, because I'm a construction worker, like I don't have a PhD in anything. I don't know, I wasn't a philosopher, but I just kind of thought people wanted to hear from just like your run-of-the-mill Catholic, like what he's going through and how he's handling this stuff. And that's kind of what we were trying to do here. But in the UK, man, I think you guys are the only channel that's even come across my radar. So I wasn't even sure if there is this sentiment in the UK, right? Like, because it seems like the bulk of the trad movement does come from America, which is why I think Francis hates America so much, because we put up the most resistance to Traditionis Custodes and things like that. So to see that is there a silent like faction in the UK that's actually still very Catholic and just going?
There definitely is, Anthony, but I think the thing is there's a cost involved to speaking out in the way that we do, and Gavin and Katherine and I have all paid that. We've all paid that price. And I was writing a blog since Pope Francis, sort of started, and I started off very positive about it because my blog was a very happy blog.
Yeah.
But it got to the point where, having studied theology, that I had questions that no one seemed to be able to answer about the direction that he was traveling in. And I think that you only get thanked for that by the priests who are struggling to maintain the Catholic faith and teach the Catholic faith. And he's undermining it, even from things like the mandatum. Do you remember that when he first did the mandatum, and he had a load of Muslim prisoners or something like that? And you know, that like there were dozens of priests who I spoke to who were like, I've been trying to teach that it's about the commissioning of the apostles in my parish for 10 years, and he's just destroyed all that, you know, overnight. So it was that kind of thing.
You do Bible studies with like Baptists and stuff, right, Mark?
Yeah, on a Monday I do Bible study at the Baptist church. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I think I just think we're in such a weird moment right now. Like
part of that feeds into that, because it's like they're excited about Jesus, they're excited about the Christian faith, and they want to learn more about it. And the old sectarian differences that used to exist, I think, don't exist quite so much anymore. So everyone in that group is someone who has heard the gospel, wandered into the Baptist church, and that's where they happen to go to church. So they're not saying keep away from, you know, Catholicism or anything like that. They obviously some of them know a little bit more about the history or whatever, and they've been taught something through their tradition. But generally speaking, if you're sitting there breaking open scripture with them and reading from the Catechism of the Catholic Church, if it embellishes their understanding, then they're only happy. And so from a point of view of worrying about the Pope and all this sort of thing, we can't do anything about the Pope.
Yeah.
What we can do is we can do stuff in our families. We can love our families. We can teach them the faith. And we're not doing it because we belong to some cult. We're doing it because we believe it's the truth, the deposit of faith given to us by God and the apostles, and the best way to live our lives. And that's why it's important to share that with our families, because it makes you function appropriately. It makes you happy according with the handbook, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So Gavin has another interview coming up. So he's gonna have to get going. But I want to see if I could get Katherine on alone, and then Mark on alone, and then all three of you on alone, because Katherine, I want to talk to you about your situation with your mom that you spoke briefly about at the conference. And Mark, the episode I want to do with you is about the loss of your daughter.
Look forward to that then.
Yeah, the thing is,
everyone will really look forward to that.
Come on and talk about all your dead relatives.
The thing is,
about the loss of my bishopric.
Let me tell you something, Gavin.
It makes me cry.
Wait, we had a funny incident at the actual conference when we were talking about how everybody presents Gavin as the what was your actual position? It was
chaplain to the Queen.
Chaplain to the Queen. So everybody kind of thinks like he had this close relationship with the Queen, and like you really got to play that up, you know. And so a woman comes over to the dinner table and mentioned it, and I go, yeah. Sadly, the Queen died of a broken heart after Gavin converted, you know, like, because the chaplaincy to the Queen isn't like you're her personal confessor. And I think that's what most people think when they hear that.
Gavin got me going around saying, like, we'd go up to people at the Catholic Identity Conference and he'd say, now listen, they're American, they love the Queen stuff. Yeah. So you just have to go along and say, just agree with me that I've signed the Official Secrets Act and I can't say anything about it, because he thought better that than say it was something of a charade. So yeah, it was quite.
Look,
I think you guys love that more than we do.
There's a weird fascination with Americans with, you know, with the king and queen over there and the royalty over there. It's a strange fascination. It's like we rebelled against you guys, but now we're all so concerned with what's going on over there.
But even the English have no idea about the strict constitutional situation. So I mean, when, for example, the moment came for me to resign, it didn't come from there was no conversation with the royal family. If you like, they're kind of second-grade employees. It was the Lord Chamberlain who phoned me up, because he runs the whole system. He's the link with the government. And very few people realize that the Queen has no personal feelings. She has no personal relationship with anybody. It's a absolutely a dramatic role.
Certainly not now.
So certainly not. Absolutely.
What do you wait? But all right, before, Gav, do you have to go right now, or I got a few minutes?
No, I don't have to go right now. No.
Okay, so what was your take on the King Charles almost an affinity for Orthodoxy. I know you guys did a show on it, but he was sending these letters with this affinity for Orthodoxy. He's the head of the Anglican Church, and he's got this, because even he knows, like, there's something, and look, obviously we're not Orthodox, but there's something beautiful about the Orthodox aesthetic, right? And I think they're getting a lot of Catholic converts because of that. Like a lot of the changes we've made in the church of leading people to go to Orthodoxy just for aesthetic reasons alone. And, you know, you don't have all the nonsense in the news and stuff. But what do you guys make of that whole scenario?
It's difficult to square the circle, because he said so many stupid things which were consistent with his Jungianism. So I don't know if there's a guy called Lawrence van der Post, who is a kind of adventurer and a disciple of Jung, and he was very close to Charles when he was young. And all the evidence is from the way Charles talks, the way he developed relationship with plants, the way he used Jungian language, that Lawrence van der Post had effectively initiated him into a kind of early Jungianism. There's no reason not to see that. There must be other strands. This thing about Orthodoxy came from a private letter that he wrote. You never know when someone's writing a letter if they're writing what someone wants to hear, or whether, you know, this is actually what he means. It even occurred to me that the whole kind of multi-faith, I want to be a defender of the faith, might have been put to him by somebody, one of his advisors, who said, look, this is how we're going to steer the monarchy. Do as you're told. There's a good chap. This is the kind of language you use. And you know, maybe the real Charles is underneath that somewhere. We have no idea. What I feel we do know is that that the whole monarchy thing in England was set up in order to keep the mass out of the hands of the English faithful. One of the reasons I've been cross about Anglicanism, about the English Reformation, about the whole Erastian setup, is that it is a conspiracy to keep the mass out of the hands of the people, and a very effective one. And in that sense, if you then look at it like that spiritually, or historico-spiritually, well, it's a very nasty satanic trick. And the sooner they stop it, the better. So one of the things you can only pray for and hope for is that actually Charles becomes a Catholic, that the royal family give up this, because they don't believe in it.
Could you imagine?
Well, I can imagine. I can imagine anything. They don't believe anything, in the sense that the royal family is an ideological arm of the government's religious affairs program.
Yeah,
they don't believe anything. It was a settlement in order to avoid a civil war, and what it now acts as is a kind of social glue for as long as Christianity was the currency. Christianity isn't the currency anymore. Disney is. So then the royal family does Disney in terms of its coronations and its funerals. There's nothing at the heart of it. And it doesn't matter what Charles thinks or believes, because he's only in it to act a role. So if Charles does happen to have a thought, he's got to leave the role to express it. In other words, he cannot convert as king. What he might do is abdicate and say, I'd like to go and live on Mount Athos. That would be quite exciting.
Yeah.
But
that would be.
But there's no way in which the thing itself can evolve or change. It's completely stuck.
Yeah. While we're on the topic of Orthodoxy, real quick, Katherine, you interviewed Jonathan Peugeot twice, right?
Yeah, I've spoken to him a couple of times. Yeah.
Okay, so he is one of my favorite creators, which is a sad thing to say about the state of Catholic content creation, because he's such an interesting guy. And I've found a lot of, he's been a force for good for Christianity in general. Yeah. And I do think when you put guys like him and Tom Holland and Jordan Peterson, there is this movement towards like a return to religion, right? Like, it may not be specifically Catholic, but I think because the culture is so insane at this point that people are like I say to my kids all the time, the greatest proof of God is the disordered lives of the non-believers. Like, when you really look at how disordered the thinking is of an atheist, what they'll allow their children to do, and you know, you'll have moms who will watch over their child's every move on their phone, but then go allow them to go cut their breasts off for a gender transition. These are the disordered minds of the non-believers, and I do see those guys as good figures, even though they're not specifically Catholic. Even Jordan Peterson, I know everybody gets on him for being Gnostic. I think he's brought about a genuine interest in people going back and reading scripture. I could criticize him for a million things, but with Jonathan, how did you even get those conversations to happen, and how did they go for you?
I think I had a connection with him from when I was doing the podcast I mentioned back in the COVID years, before we started Catholic Unscripted, and kept that connection. I met up with him when we were in Ireland, and also I was at the ARC conference in London last February, and he was there. So our paths have crossed a little bit there. And I do think I agree with you. I think he's a gentleman. I think he's by and large an honest man with integrity, and has a real he has deep insight, and I do think, like you say about all these men, they are bringing people to Christ. My only reservation would be, well, there's not the fullness of faith for a start, and the more celebrity they get, this is a danger for all of us. It's a danger for us even. The more celebrity they get, the more opportunity they get, and certainly the more money they get, there's going to be a pull that will become a temptation to compromise. And you can see little tweaks of it sometimes in some conversations. It's something people criticize Bishop Barron for when he spoke to Ben Shapiro, and it's the same sort of thing. You can think, oh, come on, I know you might have wanted to say something else, but you held back. Now there's prudence, of course, but I think we always have to be able to speak the truth in love, but not compromise. And my fear would be, as he grows, his sort of symbolic world grows, and he's pulled into this celebrity world more. I hope he doesn't lose that initial wisdom and insight.
I worry about myself making those same mistakes, because especially if you invite somebody on to have a conversation, and you're on friendly ground, right?
Yeah.
It's difficult to, I mean, if somebody starts an argument with me, I'll go at it with you. There's no holds barred. But when you're in a friendly environment, it's hard to be offensive. You don't want to be offensive, and you're not. I don't think Barron thought of what the consequences of those comments would be, that Catholicism is the privileged way, something like that, right? Now, Barron, I don't like his "Dare We Hope" thesis, the von Balthasar thesis, but I also think there's something interesting about Barron in that he's the only bishop I see going and trying to talk to men. So him having a conversation with Jordan Peterson and Jonathan Peugeot, he's trying to reach a male audience. And we're in a church now where it's dominated by, how can we make women more inclusive? How can we get women deacons? And I think the church is hemorrhaging young men right now because they see it as an effeminate version of Christianity, and where Orthodoxy seems very masculine. The men are men and the women are, more feminine. But the Catholicism being presented to the masses by the hierarchy is just so watered down and run by women. I mean, it goes down to every single parish, and I'm comfortable saying this with you because I know you hate feminism more than any of us. It's like
the harm and the damage. Yeah.
There's nothing that will turn a young boy off of wanting to be an altar server than having a girl being an altar server alongside him. And the idea of the altar server was to inspire young men to be priests. So what did you think was going, now you put these girls there, now they're inspired to be priests. And now you have this group of women who are going on strike during Lent. It's like, what you should do? You should give up trying to be a priest for Lent and then just stick with it. Like, just keep going with it. So I think the Peugeot stuff, I 100% agree with you on that, where it is a danger. The bigger you get, the more pressure that gets put on you. But I mean, so far, look, he's not Catholic, but he has a very interesting take on, did you see his take on the double symbolism of the upside down cross?
I'm not sure I did see that one.
So it's about, so Peter is crucified upside down, but the Satanists also use that symbol, right? An upside down cross, the Satanists use it. And he just goes, I don't want to drag this out, but he goes into just showing how when Peter is doing God's will, he's crucified upside down. When Peter is focused on man, and like after he makes his profession of thou art the Christ, Jesus says, "Get behind me, Satan," when he says, "No, Lord, we won't allow you to go in," right? So there's this dynamic in Peter where at times he's following Christ's will and he dies upside down, and the other time Christ calls him Satan because he's more concerned with the doings of man. And it seems like what's happening in the papacy right now, we have a pope who's more concerned with the goings on of men than what God actually cares about. But the beautiful thing about that analogy is at the end, you have Peter at the fire, and the 3 times he denied Christ gets reversed with, "Peter, do you love me?" those 3 times. So there will be a story arc with the papacy where I know things seem dismal and bleak right now, but something beautiful will come, I think, in our lifetimes. I'm more optimistic than Gavin.
Yeah, I think so. I'll just make a final comment because I know Gavin's got to run to an LBC interview in a moment. But you're right that the church is full of women. It's run by women. When we went to Holy Name Cathedral in Chicago, it was really it was awful, wasn't it? I mean, we've spoken about that experience, and there were women tottering around on the altar. But what I want to say to that, and this is part of a bigger conversation that we might have another time, is I think that is a masculine move by those women. It's not feminine women. It's women who have said, "I reject my femininity in feminism." So by taking on, as Alice von Hildebrand said, feminism is a great masculine victory. They've rejected their femininity. In other words, their givenness and the idea of this receiving. And instead they're saying, push aside, I'm in charge. Yeah. And what they've done is made a masculine move, because of course, when we talk about men and women, we're talking about the instantiation of the principle of masculinity and femininity. So when a woman says out of the way, it's my way, and stamp their feet and demand things, even though they're women, it's still a masculine move. So actually the church is feminine. That's why we call her she, Mater e Magistra, mother and teacher. And we are feminine before God, who gives us everything. Yeah. And so I think although there aren't too many women shouting and screaming about what they want in the church, and Catholics for choice, and abortion is, healthcare, and we want to be women priests, I reject the idea that they are feminine. Yeah. They're just dressed as women and happen to be women.
Trying to usurp the role of men.
And trying to usurp the role of men, exactly. Yeah. But as I said, I know it's a huge topic and one perhaps for another time. But
that's what we'll do. So all right. So when I get you on, what I'll try to do is I'll try to find another American holiday where you guys, where I have off, so we could, or it might have to be a Saturday. Mark, your story of your daughter, the reason I even mentioned it is because it's just, I'm never not blown away by how God comes into our lives at what seems like the most tragic time. And it was one of the most touching stories. You just spoke from the heart. You didn't, and I think a lot of people that go through tragedy sometimes can't see God in it. And then in hindsight, it's funny, man, the times where you're at your lowest, you think God's not there, and then in hindsight, you really see his hand in it the whole time. So, okay, what do you guys have coming up? Let's wrap it up. I got to get Gavin out of here. He's probably... What do you guys have coming up that we could promote?
Well, we... yes, gosh, go Mark. My mind went completely blank.
So we were invited by a bishop to do a retreat in Ireland. It weren't that long ago, was it, guys? About a month ago, I suppose, or something. And it went really, really well. Anyway, we've got another one. We're doing another retreat. Gavin calls them treatferences because it's kind of half retreat, half conference, and where we'll all be speaking, and there's an opportunity for fellowship and that sort of thing. We've actually had Americans come over and it's in Stonyhurst, which is this amazing school where Arthur Conan Doyle went, and loads of famous people in the north of England in January. But even if anyone's interested, we're also, you can buy a link online and you can listen to all the talks as well. So that's on January the 10th over the weekend. And it's a beautiful setting, beautiful place, really historic place. But there's like a bijou hotel sort of set up with lovely food and a bar and everything. So that's the next thing in our diary.
It's lovely, and it's a recusant county. So in England, it was a stronghold of resistance against the Protestant recusancy laws under Elizabeth I. So it's got steeped in history and is wonderful, even if you just came to see and to explore the history, but you also get the talks. But as Mark said, if you visit catholicunscripted.com, you can pick up a link to those talks, which you can join us at live over the weekend. And if you can't make it live, you'll still get a copy of that recording once you've purchased the ticket for that. And that's in January. And we're also talking with Sebastian Morello, who is editor of the European Conservative, sometime next week. And he's got a very interesting take on things, and he's going to talk with a focus on tradition and English tradition, and that's going to be brilliant. And possibly Gavin and I are talking about the possibility of reporting from Notre Dame or Notre Dame as Notre Dame when it reopens after the fire next weekend. So there's a lot coming up, and I know, Anthony, you yourself are off to Italy, Rome.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah, I was gonna say, even the trip to Italy with Patrick, it's like, I don't agree with Patrick's thesis, but he's still my brother in Christ, and he invited me to go along. And I've never left America. I've been to like an island, but I've never been to Europe, and I am so excited to take my lovely wife with me and just go enjoy Italy. I mean, I still can't believe I'm going, but I leave Monday. The other thing I have to say, for anybody who has never seen these three speak publicly, it is so worth whatever it costs, or however you have to get there. They are an amazing trio. They have amazing chemistry and rapport together. If you guys are ever speaking in the States and I am able to drive to it, I am coming to see you guys again. I had such an awesome time getting to hang out and have dinner with you guys that night. I love all three of you. Thank you so much for doing this with me. And hang out for a sec when I'm going to end the stream, but I want to ask you guys something in the green room. Gav, if you got to go, you could go, but I have to just ask something real quick in the green room.
15 more minutes. It's fine.
Okay. Everybody, I'm going away. You guys won't see me for 2 weeks. Rob has a few guys coming in to fill in for me while I'm gone. So I think this is going to go up publicly on Tuesday. So I'll see you guys in a couple of weeks. Thank you, everybody. And please hit like and subscribe. Thank you.